Hello, everybody. Thanks for watching the replay of the real moment of truth transition. We're going to talk about some exciting stuff here today. I'm with my buddy Sam, my teaching partner, and today, Sam, we're talking about transition.
Yes, a big thing that we think is going to help your golf game and something that kind of gets overlooked before impact.
So, as if you've watched some of our videos before, you know that we love sharing what we know about golf, about the golf swing. We don't know everything.
No, we don't.
We do know a little bit, and we also love hearing from you, not only where you're from, but maybe if you agree with us, if you disagree with us. Today we got a really hot topic, transition, which I think, Sam, I don't know about you, but I think that's really the true moment of truth. When you see somebody's got a good transition, man, you know you've got something special.
Definitely, and I think all the top instructors out there right now are teaching all different levels this move. Once you start to learn how to swing the golf club, this is really going to help you shape the golf ball in the way that you want it to. So
it's a hot topic right now, and the stuff that we're going to talk about, we're going to go from like, hey, what did the feet do in transition? What are the hips doing? What is the upper body, the arms, and the all-important relationship between the club head and stuff like that. We're going to talk not real deep science, but a lot of this stuff, quite honestly, I didn't come up with. I've learned from other people.
Definitely, we take ideas from other people, and we'll kind of mention those people at the end here that are great instructors that we definitely look up to and look at this move.
So we're going to give everybody kind of some chances to log in here. Once you get in, like you said, let us know where you're from or what else, maybe what's your favorite club.
Yeah, what's your favorite club to use?
If you're getting out golfing, we're not right now.
No, we're expected to have snow here in about 2 or 3 hours, probably 5 to 8 inches. Tell us also who you think maybe going to win this upcoming PGA tournament. I believe it's out at Pebble Beach, right, Todd?
Yeah, Pebble Beach.
So, so it's a pro-am again. So I think, I've never played out there. That's on the bucket list for me for sure. So I want to kind of hear,
Anybody ever played there?
Yeah, has anybody played out there? Todd, have you played?
No, I have not. I've been there, but I have not played there yet.
So, the iconic holes, 7, the par 3 down the hill towards the ocean. 18, obviously the par 5, you're kind of shaping around the ocean there. So again, this is going to be a great topic. We think, shallowing the club is really going to help you shape the shots that you want to see. And we'll talk about some certain variables that you need to kind of look for if you have like a launch monitor, things like that, some things that are really going to help you hit a draw.
Yeah. So as we're going through this, what I want to do is if you give us some input on maybe what you've heard about the transition. Is there certain things that people have told you, or is it a move that you really struggle with? But before, let's first of all talk about what is the what part of the golf swing is transition. Sam, I got my own definition, but I'd be curious, how would you define the transition? At what moment in the golf swing does that take place?
So the transition really happens when we get to the top of the golf swing, okay? And so when we're up at the top, our shoulders have stopped. And when this handle starts moving down, that first moment where it's starting to move back towards the target, and my body's going towards the target, that's my definition of transition. So, everybody has a little bit different terminology of that, but again, it's just that moment where this club is starting to move the momentum towards the target.
Yeah. And I that's pretty close to how I would describe it too. Like Sam, you said there, each instructor might have a little bit of different definition. Some will talk about, they think the moment of transition is when the hips start to change direction. Some of them will say maybe the arms. The club is very popular, like you mentioned. If I could borrow that. I like to look at, when I'm videotaping students, the club head. So I'll look at the moment when the club head starts to change direction. So at any moment in everybody's golf swing, at some point, it comes to a stop and it starts to move the other direction. So at that moment when it starts to change directions, that's kind of when I like to look at it. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. At the end of the day, it's the start of the downswing, yes. I guess, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
So anyhow, so we've got quite a few people logging on already. So like we said earlier, be sure to let us know maybe where you're from, or if you have questions specific on the transition or things that you've heard about it. We're always curious there. So let's talk a little bit about what are some common faults that we see in the transition. What would you say is the most common thing you see? What do people instinctively do wrong?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we see as instructors, again, when we're at the top here, no matter what position they are, people have different planes per se. Some people have arms really high, maybe their hands are really deep this way with their plane. but we tend to see the over the top move. So the first movement is our hands to work out, and that moves this club head a little bit on top here, which we'll get into a little bit. But if this club head gets over this way, over our hands, we're in a lot of trouble, Todd. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that and some other faults kind of built around that.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. I think that, let me switch spots with you, that most golfers slice. All right, so if you're on and here and you're watching and you're a slicer of the golf ball, let us know, because I think what we're going to talk about here can certainly help you out. And what Sam said is perfect. Most high handicappers slice a golf ball, and the first move is, I like to watch the club head. Some people will kind of focus on the handle, and there's a lot of different things that people look at. You mentioned the word plane earlier. That's something I want to talk about before we're done here today, so don't let us forget to talk about that. But I like to watch the movement of the club head, and what I want to see ultimately is I want to see the club head in transition start to move a little bit back and basically kind of behind the hands. I don't like to see it, as Sam said perfectly, start to work up this way. Anytime we start steepening the shaft early in transition, doesn't mean it's impossible to hit a good golf shot, but it's going to be pretty darn difficult. So that's kind of what we want. What we want to see in the transition is we want to see the club head start to move down, or what in golf terms we might call it shallowing. Okay, and keep in mind that shallowing isn't necessarily. Somebody could be here, right, and they could shallow it. Somebody could be really flat in their backswing and they could shallow. So it's not so much. Don't get caught up too much in the initial angle, but how does that angle change? So if we think of like Jim Furyk.
Yes.
Okay, so Jim Furyk, he's done pretty well.
He's doing all right. He's still a pretty good player.
Last time I checked, his checkbook probably is much higher than mine.
Yeah.
But anyhow, he, as we know, he kind of takes it back and then way up. So people say, oh, the swing is super steep, maybe. I don't know. But if you look at it, it obviously works this way. So even though it's in a steep angle at one moment in the golf swing, it definitely falls down underneath. What other golfers do you think kind of have a unique move there that?
Yeah, I think
Peter.
I also think that something to make sure you're aware of is, as long as this club, when we want it to shallow, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be a certain amount of shallowing. Obviously, this angle is going to be more than this angle, but kind of a common thing we say, as long as the club is shallowing. So again, a Bubba Watson has less actual angle on his shallowing than, say, a Rory McIlroy, who's really getting it kind of coming in at this angle. So again, Bubba's a little bit more, it looks steep, but the club is actually shallowing, Todd.
Yeah.
And again, just the Rory is coming in a little bit more at this angle. But it doesn't, everyone's going to have a little bit different swing. It's kind of the motion of it, but how they come down into transition, as long as it's shallowing, is going to promote probably a good golf shot.
I think the key I want everybody to take away from this part of our conversation here is, I don't want you thinking anymore in terms of flat or upright or in terms of a plane. We got Jim Furyk, we just talked about, very upright backswing, okay, but it's working from an upright to a shallow. You have some guy, Sergio Garcia.
Yes.
He's pretty flat on the back, but it's still shallowing coming down. So the key is not necessarily is it flat or steep or whatever. I don't even like those words anymore. But is it actually shallowing? Because you could have somebody, would it not be true, Sam? You could have somebody maybe in the backswing who's really flat, but they might steepen it coming in. That would probably be worse, right?
Absolutely,
Than
yes.
somebody who was steep and went shallow. Would you agree or not?
I would agree, 100%. So, again, it's more of the motion of it, and then what we're looking for, the motion on the downswing. It's not so much those static positions. It's going to help if you're in a certain spot, and we're going to try to promote a certain type of a swing, but we know that every golfer is unique, and that's the great thing about it. That's why you watch on tour, you see all these unique swings, but if you look at them in the transition, even before impact, they're all shallowing the club. There's some pretty interesting statistics that they've taken where about 39 or 40 out of the golfers that they took statistics that is showing that the club is laying down or kind of tumbling behind their hands.
Yeah. And I've got, so we're going to talk here in a second about how we do that, because I know that's why all of you are logged in here. So if you got some ideas on how you do that, or something like that, be sure to type them in the comments. We'll be happy to answer those, or curious to hear what you have to say. But just to kind of conclude this point here, I have two professionals who I work with who are, I mean, they're world-class players. One of them is a little bit more up on the backswing, one of them is a little bit more flat. And they're both phenomenal ball strikers, but both of them all move the club from a position where it's actually shallowing down a little bit. And that's why, if I could borrow this real quick, Sam, switch spots with you here. That's why I really like to work with that's why I really like to think of like, what's the club head doing? What's the club head doing? Is it falling or wherever it's at? And I think that's a really good, way to look at that. So let's talk about, now we know kind of what we want to do. Let's talk about how we're going to do that, right? That's the secret sauce. So Sam and I are going to give you some ideas, and maybe we'll come up even with a couple drills or something that we could do. But should we talk about the lower body first?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you got any ideas out there, like, hey, what should the lower body be doing, or what have you been told? I'd be curious to hear it, because there's all kinds of different things. So I'm going to give you kind of my thought. I'm going to talk first of all about the feet, and then we'll kind of work our way all the way up to the club. So I like to see here in the backstroke, and we've talked a lot about foot pressure and pressure movement. We did our last video on pressure movement last week. It was really good. But at the top of the backswing, I like to see most of the pressure towards kind of the back of the right foot. So basically, kind of guys and gals, in this position right in here. At the top of the backswing, I like to see it kind of sitting in this spot. I don't want to see it on the outside of the foot. Definitely don't want to see it out on the toe, but basically right in the middle of the foot and positioned slightly behind the back arch. I think that's a good spot for it to be on the backswing. Now, in the transition, which is what we're talking about, I like to see, this is going to be a little different than probably what you've heard. Okay, maybe not. Maybe take lessons from Sam and you've heard this before. I don't know. But I want to see just what I like to call a little bit of I call it kind of a sit, or I don't want to say squat, but I like to see just that moment in that transition where we kind of almost increase the pressure on the right foot and we just kind of sit on it a little bit. And I find with my students that kind of helps them actually let the club fall a little bit. But what are your thoughts, Sam?
Absolutely. I think Todd hit it really well there with, as much as we want to do with our arms and what the club is actually doing in transition, our body is a big reason what's happening. So when he talks about, kind of squatting or feeling like he's staying a little bit on this side, it's helping him, because we talked about last week with the first pressure, a lot of people tend to get a little bit this way.
Yeah.
Okay, so we call that kind of a linear move, or a move towards the target where they're kind of sliding. Well, you can watch what's kind of happened with this club. And this is just an assumption. It's an inclination that we have. So when we get like this, the club is usually kind of steepening like this. So what Todd mentioned, again, if you feel a little bit more squat and sit, you're going to be able to use your hips to more move in a rotational way, which helps the club kind of lay down or tumble behind you, in that word that we use, shallow.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because, and I have to be honest, I mean, there was a point in my teaching career where I told people, and I'd be curious, anybody here watching, have you ever been told, maybe from a golf coach or an instructor or a magazine, where, from the move you got to really go hard towards a target? I mean, there's probably a time in my teaching career I may have even taught that.
Yeah, I was taught that growing up all the way until probably about 5 years ago.
Yeah. So in terms of the feet, what we're saying here, because that's the first place I'm going to look. If I see somebody who's coming over the top, or they're steepening the shaft coming in, whatever word we want to use, the first place I'm going to look is, okay, what are the feet doing? Because that might not be the 100% of the answer, but that's going to give me some pretty good ideas. Because typically what I'm going to see is that, let me switch spots to here again, Sam. What I'm going to typically see is if somebody's coming over the top or getting steep, is that, if we've got any questions too, you can let us know there. So, put your hands up. So I'm going to see a real strong movement, like Sam said, either too far this way, okay, which can cause a variety of things. We're not saying everybody who goes this way is steepening the shaft. It's possible. They could even be dropping it further behind, but it's not something we like, okay? But also, more than likely, we'll see a lot of movement out towards the toe. We'll see a lot of this. We'll see the pressure going too far towards the toe too early versus just that little bit of that sit.
Yes.
So, all right, so what about what do you think about the hips? Like, so we got the feet, right? Let's talk a little bit about the legs and the pelvis.
Yeah.
You want to share some ideas maybe what do you like to see when you're watching people?
So last week in the video, we talked about where we like to see our pressure in our feet. And a lot of that is getting it kind of into our trail heel. All right, so when we turn back, a big part of it is setting yourself up for success in your backswing.
100%.
So, as a prerequisite, you're back here and you're feeling in your right heel, which should make this leg feel a little bit taller, or released as we call it as well. So when we do this, it should actually help kind of your downswing with your pivot. Okay, if we get into something where we're out in our toes, that's probably going to affect what we do up here. But we look definitely for pressure in our heel, which allows us then when we make our rotation, our pivot, we're able to kind of sit in there. My legs, again, I'm kind of squatting down into the ground a little bit, and then I'm able to come back through, and I should feel like I'm finishing a little bit in my left heel.
Yeah.
So it feels a little bit of a right heel, again, probably middle of the arches. So my legs are working within what my feet are doing.
Yeah.
They're really directly affected by where the pressure are in my feet.
I like that. I like what you said about from kind of going from the heel and then maybe a little bit of sit and then towards the left heel a little bit. And this is, I don't know if you can get this on there, Nick. If anybody knows who this is, type it in the comments there. This is our favorite picture here at the Academy. And our kids, when our kids come out, they don't know who this person is. They have no, but if you know who this person is, type it in the comments there. And maybe we should start giving away some stuff. I don't know. We got some prizes or something we could give away. But if you know who that is, type it in there. And what I love about this picture is the pelvis movement, and as Sam was alluding to, a little bit of the right leg there. So let me switch with you there, Sam. In that, we really are big advocates of letting the right leg release a little bit, or the trail leg release a little bit, so you can get into the hip, loading into the glute. Obviously, the right heels, things all tie together. It's really the same thing that we're saying there. And so I tell people, hey, if you've got 30 degrees of bend at a dress, maybe you're going to be 15 at the top. Whatever. Some guys are more, some gals are less. It doesn't matter. But you definitely want to release that a little bit. It allows you for your pelvis to kind of rotate and tilt a little bit. That's a big thing. The load, you got to let that pelvis tilt, and that happens by the right leg releasing a little bit. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're looking for. Don't you think, Sam, in terms of the feet and the legs and the pelvis? We're looking for some rotation. We like to see the hips release, right leg release a little bit so you can load into the glute and into the right heel.
Yes.
And as Sam said perfectly, you got to set yourself up for success. If you don't like your transition move, look at what you're doing before that, don't you think?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Again, we've talked about kind of little things before. Again, no one's going to have a perfect swing as long as it's repeatable. Yeah. And again, if it's predictable and you can continue to get in that spot, but you may find that something later or earlier in your swing is really causing you not to be able to make that transition move.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about our lower body. So Todd, I'd be curious what you think about kind of, let's work a little bit more up into maybe our arms a little bit, and what our elbows are doing that kind of can help the club kind of shallow a little bit.
Great question. Because I think this is the part where we see some differences. Mm-hmm. I think I'm not gonna say everybody, but I think most instructors would agree on the hips and the leg stuff and the foot pressure. I'm sure there are a few out there who don't, and that's okay. There's a lot of ways to do it. But this is where it can get a little bit dicey and different thoughts of how we should do it. Personally, I like to see, in terms of the arms and the elbows, I like to see the lead arm kind of across the chest. I like the right elbow, and without diving too deep in all the different terminology, because I'll probably do it wrong.
Yeah.
And my PT guys will call me and say, that's the wrong word, but we're learning all those words right now. But basically, I like to see the right elbow, basically kind of pointed down, and rotated this way versus out that way. Now, there are people who, at the top of their backswing, are like that, and I'd be curious to know if you know somebody who would be a famous golfer who's kind of like that. Type it in the comments there, because I got a couple in mind already who are this way. Most of them are like this. But the key is that even if they're rotated this way, when they come down, it works that way. So I'm walking a lot at the trail elbow.
Okay, that's great. So when you do this, what is it in relation to kind of your side there? if the elbow's behind, what's going to happen there with the club?
Great question. So if we're maybe let's move over here, Nick. So because Sam hit the nail on the head right there. So if the elbow kind of gets behind me and works this way, as he said earlier, then the shaft's going to you're going to put force on this side of the club. This is the most common reason people come over the top, I think, is here, their right elbow folds back, the club works behind them, and then they're putting torque or force, whatever word you want to use, energy, I like to use the word energy, I think it's easier for people to understand. Then they put energy on the club this way, and that tilts it, and then the head goes, and then we got nothing.
Yeah.
Then we're stuck. But what do you think?
Definitely, I think that's an epidemic that happens to a lot of people, which probably happens earlier in their takeaway, but again, their elbow is kind of tucked behind. So I think a good description, Todd, for kind of where this elbow should feel is think of like skipping a rock. Okay, so if you're gonna skip a rock, you're not gonna throw it down into the water like that. You're gonna get your elbow here and get the rock to skip across the water. So that feeling, if you can, feel that right now, if you just pretend to skip a rock, that's kind of the feeling that you want this elbow to somewhat feel at the top.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I agree 100%.
So even like a baseball player, like a shortstop that's going to flip it to second, they're going to kind of throw it like this. And again, that's kind of the motion that you want to feel with your elbow without getting too technical. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that's where when most people come over the top, that's typically what we'll see. All right, so that's a little bit about the feet, a little bit about the pelvis, kind of how it's moving, the arm a little bit. What do you think about, Sam, what do you think about the movement of the hands in the transition? Do you like to see them kind of work out? Do you like to see them work down? Do you like to, because there's a wide variety of opinions right now floating around. What do you see? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
A couple of thoughts with that. Again, you can hit golf shots from all these different positions.
Yeah.
So what I like to see when we get to the top is, I see a lot of people that hit draws or even over the top. Again, the arms come straight down this way. That doesn't mean that they can't swing the club out and maybe even shallow the club later.
Yeah.
But they're probably going to have to do something different that's going to affect their ball at the bottom. And it's probably not going to be consistent. So I think we like to see here, like this handle is working a little bit more out. Again, from here, if the handle works out, this club head is going to be able to tumble and be behind my hands.
I think what you said there, to interrupt real quick. So go ahead, if you go to the top there again. I think this is important for everybody to watch. What Sam is saying here is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but if the handle works a little this way, that the club head has a better chance to fall, versus if the handle works down this way, it's going to want to work more, or steepen or work more that way.
That's exactly
right. True?
That's true. So again, there's a couple outliers out there that can make it work.
Absolutely.
But for some of us that may feel, if we're doing this, you're like, well, I'm going to go over the top. You have to have a good backswing where your hand, if you try to do this and your hands are out here and you try to push them out, of course, I'm in trouble. Yeah. But if you have a good backswing and your hands are back off of your right shoulder, this move of feeling your hands working out, you're going to be able to shallow the club and hit a draw.
That's gold right there. What Sam was just talking about is like, I mean, and if I could borrow that, let's switch spots again here, is that I think this is why, guys and gals who are watching this, I really, really like, we got a couple other people, got a couple people from England here.
Yeah, we've been getting a following.
This is good. I know a couple people from Sweden, but that's about as close to, that's about as close as we need to make a trip to England. Oh, we should talk about John's golf swing. That's a good question. Or any other golf swings of tour professionals that you guys have watched, and you want to type their names in there and just Sam and I can kind of give our thoughts on that, we would be happy to do that for you. But what Sam just said earlier there is golden. And that's why I'm going to really strongly encourage you to get away from this conversation about over the top, steep, they said off plane, all those things. And if you really just kind of watch what the club head is doing. We got a couple other things there, Sam, if you want to look at those.
Yeah.
Guys, if you watch what the club head is doing in transition, this is going to tell you what you need to know. All right? If that's moving this way a little bit, okay, whatever, it might start here. It might be like this at the top of the backswing, right? Remember we talked about Jim Furyk? but it's also here and it's moving that way. Okay, that's the key. Or it could be way over here, Ben Hogan or Sergio Garcia, I don't know.
Yeah.
Trevor Immelman, who won the Masters. Okay, but it still falls that way. That's the key. Now, what Sam said, I would agree with. I think, and there are always outliers, okay, but if the handle moves a little this way first, I think that allows the club to fall back. I'm not saying that you can't move it this way and steepen it, but I think generally, if the hands work a little like this, then the club head falls down a little bit.
So we had a question. You guys see this stuff?
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So we had a question just about if you're in this position and you push the handle out, aren't you going to have to catch up your hands and flip at the bottom? So it's a great question. The one thing that we believe here, again, is your pivot is going to kind of control what the club does. So eventually your club is going to catch up to your body, and that's a good thing. We don't want to feel like our hands are in front of our body, because eventually we're going to rotate. And again, if you can kind of see my arm here, if I push this out and I rotate, this arm is going to stretch. You see some of the best golfers where this arm right across their body is really stretched out. It looks like it's about to break. Well, when they rotate, it kind of works like a slingshot, Todd, where this really comes through. The flipping, again, comes from a little bit disconnection, but it definitely doesn't come if your body's rotating and your hands are kind of getting pushed out as opposed to pulled down. Eventually, you're going to be able to just rotate, and that club's going to come down on plane, and hopefully shallow.
I would agree 100%. I think that we're seeing a pretty strong trend. We'll see where we're at. In a couple of years, we might be different. But right now, you look at the best players, the top players in the world, Dustin Johnson. They mentioned John. Guys who've been winning. You're seeing a lot of rotation in the body right now. And I really think we're going to see that for a long time. I think that that's going to be here to stay. I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. I've been wrong, or the last time. But and I agree with Sam, I think the better way to release the club is and I just was working on this with a couple of students the last couple of days, getting the club head a little lower, as Sam said, okay, and getting the face squared up, and then just feeling the rotation and squaring the club face through opening and rotating. If you look at most of our good players these days, they're pretty rotated and pretty open. And if you look at high handicappers who are slicing the ball, they're typically pretty close or squared up. And so I'm going to probably go with more of what I'm seeing the best players do. But that's a great question that should be asked there. Any other good questions you guys got, be sure to fire them out. But that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, you could get a flip out of this if you're not rotating.
Yeah,
if you stop, if your body stops, then the hands, they're always going to catch up. They're always going to come around. So if you're stopping, if I'm continuing to rotate, that club's going to release naturally, as opposed to if I'm not rotating and I just kind of slide or stop, then the hands are going to catch up and there's no momentum to continue going forward, and you're going to probably flip your hands through.
And I know this is a little bit off topic, but Sam, could you go to that position in the downstroke again? Do you think it would be possible too, if maybe they had the face laid open, then they might flip too?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right? So I think lots of times maybe what Chubb's alluding there a little bit to is if that face is laid way open, yeah, of course down at the bottom they're going to rotate and flip that to try to square it. Now, and this is, like I said, a little bit off topic because today we're talking about transition, but I would say that, here's another key, I think, is that you got to get that club face squared up early, and then you can rotate. So I think the flip that you might see from that position, we have seen it, is more a byproduct of the face being open than the club being in the wrong position.
Yeah, I'd say most of the time that is what we've seen. Yeah. It can come from different areas, but we agree with Todd on that.
All right, so any other things that we've talked about? A lot of good stuff here today.
I think, that's enough to digest. And, I think the big thing, again, Todd alluded to it, is it's more the motion, making sure that club is shallowing or tumbling behind us. Everyone's going to have different planes per se, but we don't even like those words because we just don't think it matters that much.
Well, how could it? I mean, you got Jim Furyk, you've got John Rahm, you've got Sergio Garcia, you got Roy McIlroy. They're all on different. They're not even on planes. They're all on different. Their own planes, and they're all making a lot of money.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think that, again, it's repeatable for them. So we'd like to see certain things, but that's where golf is so great, is you have your unique swing. As long as you're shallowing and you want to shallow the club, I mean, I think that's important, because you can still hit, if you say your favorite shot is a cut, you still want to shallow the club.
Absolutely.
You can hit a cut with a shallowing move.
Yeah.
I think there's a misconception that if you shallow it, you're just going to hit a draw.
Yeah.
So that's another discussion that we could have.
Yeah, all about matching it up. All about matching up. So let's do this. Let me switch. So let's do a recap. We've got a couple of you. Thanks, Kevin, for that nice comment. I'm glad you guys. Hopefully, their stuff we're doing helps you guys out. We just love sharing. Like I said earlier at the beginning of this video, we certainly don't know everything. We know a little bit, and we learn it every day. And we just take what we know and we share it with you. And we love hearing the dialogue back and forth. And like Chubby had a great question there, and the ability to kind of maybe, hey, I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me. I heard something different. We love that dialogue, so we're all learning. So let's just take last 60 seconds here. Let's recap what we've talked about. We're talking about the transition. We really think that that's the moment of truth, more so than impact. I would encourage you, when you start looking at your golf swing, look at what the club head is doing when it's changing direction. That's kind of how Sam and I would define the top of the swing when the transition happens. What is the club doing in the transition? No matter where it's at the top, the first thing it should do is fall a little bit. How are you going to do that? I think the key is having, like Sam said perfectly, getting yourself set up for success. I think you should turn, you should be into the right heel, the hip should be releasing, you're loaded into the glute because the trail leg is released just a little bit. Your arms kind of, we talked a little bit about the right elbow, the trail elbow. I think that's a key for us. Sam gave you the great analogy of kind of skipping the rock and then feeling like you're just opening and rotating. So anything else that we missed that we need to review?
I don't think so. I think, again, if you're interested in this huge topic of discussion, there's many teachers out there.
Some great teachers.
I would always go towards Todd, because I think he knows this move just as good as any other instructor out there. But a couple other people, George Gankis, his name on Twitter handle is GG Swing Tips. He has a unique look, but he's all about shallowing the golf club. Joseph Mayo.
Mayo's got some great stuff.
Yeah.
Andrew Rice has got great stuff. Martin Chuck. You guys have probably heard of a lot of these guys, and they're smart people. Yeah. They're smart people, and you could learn some good things from them. So if you like what we're doing, we like what we're talking about here today, we're going to keep doing these over the course of the whole golf season. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter, on our US Golf TV, and our Instagram, and then our main spot, usgolftv.com. That's where we have all of our content. We got just a ton of great stuff there that you can look, that can help you play better golf. And at the end of the day, that's really what we want to do. So anything else before we sign off here?
No, I think we're just excited. Again, another topic to help you and hopefully answer some questions for you.
All right, thanks for watching. Thanks to our guys from England for logging in all the way over there. So we appreciate that, and we look forward to seeing you next time.